The night sky of the alien world burned with fire as the human ship came crashing down. Metal screamed against the atmosphere. Sparks flew like falling stars, lighting up the jungle below. Birds with crystal wings scattered into the sky, screaming in strange alien tones. The jungle trembled as the ship tore through trees, smashing against stone cliffs, and finally slid into a valley covered with thick vines. Inside, Captain Daniel Blake fought against the controls. His eyes were wide with panic, sweat dripping down his face. He had been on a solo mission, charting new systems, when a sudden storm of meteors struck his ship. Now everything was ruined. Red warning lights blinked in every corner of the cockpit. "Not like this, not here," he muttered, gripping the controls tightly. The ship finally shuddered to a halt, broken and smoking. Silence followed, broken only by the sound of burning metal and distant roars from the jungle. Daniel unbuckled himself, chest rising and falling rapidly. He grabbed the emergency pack, stumbling through the broken door. The air hit him at once, thick, humid, filled with the scent of flowers mixed with something dangerous. Strange glowing insects flew around, their wings leaving trails of green light in the dark. He had survived the crash, but survival was only the beginning. Daniel walked carefully through the vines, trying to find a safe spot. His boots sank into the wet ground. The jungle was alive with sounds, hissing, growling, whispers of leaves moving even when there was no wind. Every step made him feel smaller, like the forest itself was watching him. He reached a small clearing and tried to set up a fire. His hands shook as he struck the flint, sparks dancing on dry leaves. The fire caught slowly, giving him a small circle of light against the endless darkness. For a moment he felt safe, but then he heard it, a sound, soft at first, then louder. The crunch of footsteps. Not human, too light, too careful. He turned quickly, eyes scanning the jungle. The shadows between the trees shifted, and then he saw them. Figures. Tall, graceful, moving silently. Their skin glowed faintly under the moonlight, painted with strange markings. Their hair was long, flowing like rivers of silver, black and gold. And their eyes, sharp, curious, and filled with an intensity that made his chest tighten. Alien women. Beautiful, wild, and dangerous. There were 5 of them at first, stepping into the firelight. They carried spears made of crystal and bone, decorated with feathers and glowing stones. Their clothes were woven from vines and animal skins, revealing strong, athletic bodies marked with tribal paint. They moved like hunters, silent, deadly, circling him. Daniel's heart pounded. He raised his hands slowly. I mean no harm, he said, his voice trembling but steady enough to show courage. Of course, he knew they would not understand his words. But his tone, his body language, it might matter. The tallest of the women stepped closer. Her eyes locked on him, sharp as a blade. She tilted her head, studying him like a strange animal. Then she spoke in her alien tongue, her voice musical but firm. The others laughed softly but not kindly. Daniel felt a shiver down his spine. He realized they were arguing about him. Were they going to kill him, eat him, keep him as a prisoner? He slowly reached into his pack, pulling out a small survival tool, a glowing light stick. He cracked it, and it glowed bright blue. The alien women gasped, their eyes widening. They stepped back for a moment, whispering to each other. The leader reached out, curious, touching the glow with her fingers. For a moment, her eyes softened. But then, just as quickly, her expression hardened again. She barked an order, and 2 women moved forward, pointing their spears at him. Daniel backed away, but there was nowhere to run. The fire behind him, the spears in front of him, and the jungle full of unknown dangers around him. He was trapped. They moved quickly, tying his wrists with strange vines that glowed faintly, almost alive. He struggled, but the vines tightened. His heart sank. He had gone from survivor to captive in just a few minutes. The women dragged him through the jungle, their movements swift and silent. Daniel stumbled, his mind racing. He had no idea where they were taking him. The fire was left behind, swallowed by the night. After what felt like hours, they reached a massive camp built around enormous stone pillars covered in carvings. Fires burned in circles, and dozens more alien women turned their heads as he was dragged inside. Their voices rose in surprise, laughter, and whispers. Daniel felt hundreds of eyes on him. He was the only man here. The leader shoved him forward, making him kneel in the center of the camp. The women formed a circle around him, chanting in their language. Their voices rose higher and higher, echoing through the night. Daniel's chest pounded. He was surrounded by a tribe of wild alien beauties. They were strong, fearless, and he was completely at their mercy. he realized with a heavy breath. His real struggle had only just begun. Daniel woke with the sharp sting of ropes around his wrists. The glowing vines cut into his skin as he tried to move. His body ached from the crash, his head heavy with pain. For a moment he thought it had been a nightmare, but then he opened his eyes. He was lying in a wide hut made of wood, stone, and giant leaves woven together. Strange glowing crystals hung from the ceiling like lanterns, casting soft blue light across the walls. The air smelled of smoke, herbs, and something sweet he couldn't name. And then he saw them, the alien women. 3 of them stood near the entrance, spears in hand, their sharp eyes fixed on him. They were tall and graceful, their bodies painted with swirling patterns, their hair tied with beads and feathers. Every movement they made seemed fluid, like dancers ready to strike at any moment. Daniel sat up slowly, his arms tied in front of him. His throat was dry, but he forced himself to speak. "I don't want trouble," he whispered, though he knew they didn't understand. One of the guards tilted her head. She spoke to the others in that strange musical language. The women laughed, but it was not cruel, more curious, like they were amused by a strange animal. Before Daniel could respond, the hide curtain at the entrance opened. The leader entered. She was taller than the rest, her presence commanding. Her golden hair shimmered in the crystal light, and her markings glowed faintly against her bronze skin. Her eyes were sharp and unyielding, yet filled with a strange fire. She carried no spear, she didn't need one. Authority radiated from her. The guards bowed their heads as she walked closer. Daniel felt his chest tighten. The leader studied him for a long moment, her gaze traveling over his clothes, his face, his hands. She spoke, her voice calm but firm, as if she was delivering judgment. Daniel raised his hands, tied as they were, and tried to show he meant peace. He gestured to himself. "Human," he said, pointing to his chest. Then he spread his hands. "No harm." The leader's eyes narrowed. She repeated his word, but it came out soft and broken. "Huh." Man, Daniel froze. His heart jumped. She was trying. He nodded quickly, a flicker of hope sparking inside him. "Yes, human." The leader tilted her head again, then spoke to the guards. One of them fetched a clay bowl filled with water. She set it down in front of Daniel. Daniel reached for it, but the vines around his wrists made his movements clumsy. Slowly, carefully, he lifted the bowl and drank. The water was cool and sweet. It calmed his dry throat and racing heart. When he set the bowl down, he whispered, "Thank you." The leader didn't understand the words, but she seemed to understand the tone. Her eyes softened for the briefest second. Then just as quickly the softness vanished. She barked a command and the guards pulled Daniel to his feet. They dragged him out of the hut into the heart of the camp. The camp was alive with noise. Fires burned in stone pits, sending sparks into the night sky. Dozens of alien women moved about, sharpening spears, cooking food, singing songs that rose like echoes across the valley. Children with glowing eyes chased each other, laughing, while older women painted symbols on stone walls. But when Daniel appeared, everything stopped. Dozens of eyes turned to him, curious, suspicious, some filled with amusement, some with hunger, some with something he could not name. Whispers spread quickly through the crowd. The leader raised her hand, silencing them. She stepped forward and addressed the tribe, her voice strong and commanding. Daniel could not understand the words, but he understood the tone. She was telling them who he was, or what he was. The crowd reacted with a mix of laughter, gasps, and murmurs. Then something unexpected happened. An elder stepped forward. She was smaller, her hair pure white, her body covered with dozens of painted scars. Her eyes glowed faintly in the dark, and her voice was low, carrying strange power. She studied Daniel for a long time, then pointed to him and spoke a single word that made the crowd gasp. The leader's face hardened. She argued with the elder, her voice sharp and angry. The elder stood her ground, her voice firm. Back and forth they argued, the crowd restless with every word. Daniel stood there, confused but alert. He knew this moment mattered. Something about him was dividing them. Finally, the leader barked an order. The guards shoved him toward the center of the camp, where a large stone pillar stood. Strange symbols were carved into it, glowing faintly in the firelight. The guards tied him to the pillar, his arms pulled tight. The tribe gathered around in a circle, chanting. Their voices rose higher and higher, filling the night air with strange, haunting music. The leader raised her hand and the chanting stopped. She stepped closer, her eyes fixed on Daniel. She pointed at him, then at the jungle. Her voice rang clear like a challenge. Daniel's chest tightened. He didn't know the words, but he understood. They were going to test him. He was not just a prisoner. He was on trial, and if he failed, he would not live to see another sunrise. Daniel's wrists were sore from the glowing vines that held him against the stone pillar. Hours had passed since the tribe left him there under the stars. His body was weak, but his mind would not stop racing. Why had they spared his life? Why had they argued over him? He lifted his eyes toward the sky. 2 moons shone down through the jungle canopy, bathing everything in silver light. Strange insects buzzed, and the distant cries of alien beasts echoed through the valley. The air smelled of smoke from the campfires and the sweetness of flowers that bloomed only at night. Then he heard footsteps. Light, careful steps. Not the heavy stride of the leader or the firm pace of guards. These steps were softer, hesitant. From the shadows, a young alien woman emerged. She was smaller than the others, with hair like black silk that fell over her shoulders. Her skin glowed faintly in the moonlight, marked with delicate white paint across her cheeks. Unlike the leader, her eyes did not burn with command. Instead, they were curious, almost gentle. She held a clay bowl in her hands. Steam rose from it, carrying the smell of herbs and cooked roots. Daniel blinked in surprise. Food. The young woman glanced around nervously before stepping closer. She placed the bowl near his feet, then touched the vines around his wrists. The ropes pulsed faintly, alive with strange energy. She hesitated, then spoke in her alien tongue, her voice soft like music. Daniel couldn't understand the words, but he understood the intent. She was trying to comfort him. "I'm not your enemy," he whispered, his voice hoarse. He pointed to his chest. "Daniel." She tilted her head, repeating slowly. "Da." Nightgale, his heart skipped. She had tried to say his name. Encouraged, he nodded and gave her a faint smile. Then he gestured to her with his chin. "You?" For a moment she hesitated. Then very softly she spoke. "Kayla." Daniel repeated it carefully. "Kayla." Her eyes brightened at the sound of her name in his voice. For the first time since the crash, Daniel felt something inside him ease, a small bridge between worlds. Kayla picked up the bowl and held it to his lips. Daniel drank slowly, the warm soup sliding down his throat. It was strange, bitter at first, but it filled his empty stomach and gave him strength. "Thank you," he murmured. Kayla did not understand, but the way his eyes softened made her smile faintly. She stayed there longer than she should have, whispering small words in her language as if teaching him. Daniel listened carefully, repeating sounds. She laughed softly when he made mistakes, covering her mouth with her hand. It was a sound so human, so real that Daniel forgot for a moment where he was. But their moment was short. A sharp voice cut through the night. Kayla froze. The leader stood at the edge of the clearing, her golden hair glowing in the moonlight, her eyes like fire. She barked words that made Kayla flinch. The young woman lowered her head quickly, stepping back. Daniel felt anger rise inside him. He didn't understand the words, but he understood the meaning. The leader was warning Kayla to stay away from him. Before Kayla left, she looked back once. Her eyes met Daniel's, full of something unspoken, sympathy, maybe even hope. Then she disappeared into the shadows, leaving him alone again. Daniel leaned his head back against the pillar. His chest was heavy, but there was also a flicker of strength inside him. He was not alone anymore. Someone in this tribe saw him as more than just a captive. And that bond, fragile as it was, could mean survival. The next day, the tribe gathered again. The leader announced something with a voice of thunder. The crowd cheered. Daniel was untied from the pillar, though guards still held spears close to his back. They led him to the center of the camp where a huge circle had been drawn in the dirt. Women filled the edges of the circle, chanting. Their eyes burned with excitement. Daniel's heart sank when he realized what it meant. A trial. They would make him fight. The leader pointed to him, then to the far side of the circle. From the shadows, 2 alien hunters stepped forward, their bodies painted for war, their weapons sharp. Daniel swallowed hard. He had no weapon, no armor, only his fists and his will. But then, from the crowd, he saw her. Kayla. Her eyes found his, and in that single glance, Daniel felt the bond again. A reminder, a promise. He straightened his back, clenched his fists, and took his first step into the circle. Whatever came next, He would not face it alone in spirit. The circle of dirt glowed faintly under the moonlight. Fires burned around its edge, casting long shadows of the chanting tribe. Their voices rose and fell like waves, strong and rhythmic, as if the night itself was alive. Daniel stood in the center, bare-handed. His heart pounded like a drum in his chest, but he forced himself to stand tall. If he looked weak, if he showed fear, he knew the tribe would tear him apart. The leader, with her golden hair and sharp eyes, raised her hand. The chanting stopped. She barked an order, and 2 alien hunters stepped forward. They were taller than Daniel, their bodies painted with glowing symbols, their muscles rippling in the firelight. Each carried a spear tipped with crystal that shimmered dangerously. The crowd erupted in cheers. Daniel swallowed hard. No weapons, no armor, just him. He clenched his fists, breathing deeply, remembering his survival training. He had fought before, but never like this, never in a world that wanted him dead. The leader shouted again. The trial had begun. The first warrior rushed at him with a wild cry, spear thrusting forward. Daniel dodged to the side, the crystal blade missing his chest by inches. He grabbed the shaft of the spear, twisting it sharply. The warrior growled, strong as a beast, pulling it back. The force sent Daniel stumbling. The second warrior came from behind. Daniel dropped low just in time, the spear whistling above his head. His instinct screamed, move or die. The crowd roared with excitement. Daniel forced himself to think. He couldn't match their strength. He couldn't match their speed. But he could use their momentum. He waited, letting the first warrior charge again. At the last moment, Daniel sidestepped and shoved his shoulder into the warrior's side. The hunter stumbled forward, crashing into the dirt. The tribe gasped in surprise. Daniel's chest heaved. Sweat ran down his face, his muscles burning. He turned quickly, blocking another thrust with his forearm. Pain shot through him, but he gritted his teeth and grabbed the shaft, yanking hard. For a moment, both he and the second warrior struggled. Then Daniel drove his knee into the alien's stomach. The warrior grunted, losing balance, and Daniel ripped the spear free. The crowd screamed in shock. Now Daniel had a weapon. He spun it in his hands, unfamiliar with the weight, but determination burned in his eyes. The leader watched, expression sharp but unreadable. The first warrior had risen, fury in his glowing eyes. Both hunters circled him now, cautious. Daniel kept his spear raised, every muscle in his body trembling with adrenaline. One lunged. Daniel blocked, sparks flying as crystal clashed against crystal. The other tried to flank him, but Daniel kicked out, boot striking against the hunter's knee. The alien staggered, giving Daniel a chance. With a roar, he swung the spear like a staff, knocking the weapon from the first warrior's hands. The crowd exploded with noise, half in cheers, half in outrage. Daniel's chest burned, his arms heavy. But he refused to stop. He stood his ground, raising the spear high. The second warrior snarled, charging in a final attempt. Daniel pivoted, using the alien's momentum against him, slamming the spear across his chest. The warrior fell hard, dust rising around him. Silence fell. Daniel stood alone in the circle, chest heaving, sweat dripping down his face. Both warriors were on the ground, defeated but alive. He had spared them. The tribe stared at him in shock. Whispers filled the air. No outsider was supposed to survive. No weak man should have bested 2 of their hunters. Then slowly the silence broke. A few voices cheered. Others clapped their hands against their spears. The chanting began again, louder this time. Half disbelief, half respect. Daniel lowered the spear and dropped it to the ground. He spread his arms wide, showing he had no more fight left, no cruelty. His message was simple: I am not your enemy. I am strong, but I am not here to destroy you. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Kayla, her dark hair catching the firelight, stepped forward from the crowd. Her eyes shone with pride. She whispered something softly, a word that carried through the silence. Brother. The crowd repeated it. Voices growing stronger. Brother. Brother. The leader's face remained stern. She stepped forward, looking Daniel straight in the eyes. Her lips curved just slightly, not a smile but an acknowledgement. She raised her hand to the crowd. The chanting grew into a roar. Daniel had passed the test, but deep inside he knew this was only the beginning. The trial was over, but the whispers in the camp did not end. Daniel had survived, and that survival had changed everything. Some of the tribe now looked at him with respect, others with jealousy, and some with fear. The leader allowed him to move more freely now, though always under the eyes of guards. He was no longer tied to the pillar, but he was not free either. He walked inside the camp, studying their ways. Women worked together to prepare food, sharpen weapons, and care for children. Fires burned all night, filling the air with smoke and song. But Daniel noticed something else. The elders watched him carefully, whispering among themselves. Every time his eyes met theirs, they grew silent, as if guarding a secret. One evening, Kayla approached him quietly, carrying a small basket of fruit. She glanced around to make sure no one was watching, then offered him one of the glowing fruits. Daniel smiled and accepted, biting into it. The sweet juice ran down his chin, refreshing after days of strange roots and herbs. "You," Kayla whispered, pointing to him. Then she pointed toward the jungle. "Come," Daniel frowned. It was dangerous, but her eyes were serious, almost pleading. He nodded slowly. That night, when the guard's attention wavered, Kayla led him into the dark jungle. Vines brushed against his arms, glowing insects scattered before them. The sounds of night creatures surrounded them. Growls, clicks, the flutter of wings. But Kayla moved with confidence, and Daniel followed. They walked for what felt like hours until the trees opened into a clearing. Daniel stopped, his breath catching. Before him rose enormous stone ruins, half buried in the earth. Towering pillars carved with alien symbols reached toward the sky. Broken statues lay scattered across the ground, faces of beings that looked almost human but not entirely. Their eyes were large, their hands long, their posture noble and strange. The air here felt heavier, filled with an ancient presence. Kayla stepped closer to the carvings, running her fingers across the stone. She whispered words in her language, too soft for him to understand. Then she turned to him, pointing at the carving of a tall figure standing beside alien women. The figure looked human. Daniel's chest tightened. His mind spun. Could it be? Had humans been here before? Kayla pointed to him, then to the carving. Her eyes glowed with certainty. No, Daniel whispered, shaking his head. That's impossible. But inside, a cold shiver ran down his spine. The ruins told a story. And in that story, humans had walked among these aliens long ago. He stepped closer, studying the symbols. His fingers traced the lines of the carvings. Some symbols glowed faintly when he touched them, as if reacting to his presence. Kayla gasped softly, stepping back in awe. What does this mean? Daniel muttered. He looked at her, but she only whispered a single word. Prophecy. The word was clear, even through her accent. Daniel's pulse quickened. Prophecy him? Before he could ask more, a sudden sound made them freeze. Voices. Torches flickered at the edge of the clearing. A group of warriors from the tribe stepped out, their eyes furious. They had followed them. Kayla cried out, trying to explain, but the leader herself appeared behind the warriors. Her golden hair shimmered in the firelight, her face like stone. She looked at Daniel, then at the glowing symbols under his hand. Her eyes narrowed. For a long, tense moment, no one moved. The jungle seemed to hold its breath. Then the leader barked a command. The warriors seized Daniel, pulling him away from the carvings. Kayla tried to reach for him, but one of the guards held her back. Daniel struggled, shouting, "Wait! I don't understand, please!" But his words meant nothing here. They dragged him back to the camp, throwing him to the ground before the fire. The leader stood over him, her face full of conflict, anger, fear, and something else Daniel could not name. She spoke loudly to the tribe, her words sharp as knives. The crowd answered with a roar. Daniel's chest heaved. He understood the meaning, even if he didn't know the words. They were afraid of him. The ruins, the prophecy, the glowing symbols. It had changed everything. Kayla's eyes met his across the fire. Fear burned in them, but so did something stronger. Belief. Daniel's fate was no longer just survival. He was tied to something ancient, something powerful, something the tribe did not yet understand, and that secret might save him. Or destroy him. The night was heavy with silence. After the discovery of the ruins, Daniel felt the tribe watching him with sharper eyes than ever before. Whispers followed him wherever he went. Some voices called him brother. Others spat curses under their breath. The leader remained cold, her judgment hidden behind her golden eyes. But Kayla still came to him when no one looked. Her quiet faith gave him strength. That night, Daniel sat near the fire, staring at the glowing symbols painted across the huts. The children played nearby. their laughter soft against the background of drums echoing faintly through the camp. He felt for the first time a strange sense of belonging. Then it happened. The drums stopped. A sharp cry split the night. Then another. Suddenly, chaos erupted at the edge of the camp. Arrows tipped with fire streaked through the sky, striking huts and sending flames roaring upward. Women screamed. Children ran. Warriors grabbed their weapons, shouting warnings. A rival tribe was attacking. The ground shook with the sound of heavy footsteps. Dozens of figures rushed from the jungle, their bodies painted black, their eyes burning with red light. They carried jagged blades, spears tipped with obsidian, and nets woven from bone. Their war cries pierced the night. Daniel jumped to his feet as fire spread across the camp. A warrior rushed past him only to be struck down by a burning spear. The smell of smoke and blood filled the air. For a brief moment, Daniel froze. This wasn't his fight. He could hide, escape into the jungle. No one would know. But then he saw Kayla. She was surrounded by two rival warriors, their blades raised. Her eyes widened in fear. Daniel's body moved before his mind could think. He grabbed a broken spear from the ground and charged. The first attacker swung wildly, but Daniel ducked low, driving the spear into the warrior's stomach. The alien fell with a scream. The second turned, slashing with a jagged blade. Daniel blocked with the shaft, sparks flying, then slammed his fist into the warrior's jaw. The attacker collapsed into the dirt. Kayla gasped, then whispered his name. Daniel. He nodded quickly, pulling her to her feet. Stay behind me. The camp was chaos. Fires burned everywhere, smoke choking the air. Warriors clashed in a blur of spears and blades. The leader shouted orders, her voice like thunder, rallying her people. Daniel saw her fighting too, her movements graceful and deadly as she cut down one enemy after another. But the rival tribe kept coming. Daniel grabbed another fallen weapon, heavier this time, more like a staff. He spun it in his hands, forcing attackers back. His muscles screamed, but adrenaline burned through him. He fought not as a prisoner, but as one of them. Every strike, every block, every shout was for survival. Not just his own, but for Kayla, for the children, for the camp that had half accepted him. At one point, 3 attackers rushed him at once. Daniel ducked under the first swing, elbowed the second, and slammed the staff across the third's legs. He roared with effort, the firelight reflecting in his eyes. The tribe noticed. Warriors around him shouted his name, cheering him on. The word spread like wildfire through the chaos. Human fights with us, then came the beast. From the shadows of the jungle, the rival tribe unleashed a massive creature. Its body was covered in scales, its mouth full of fangs, and its roar shook the ground. Chains of bone rattled as the rival warriors drove it forward, straight into the camp. The tribe screamed in terror. Daniel's heart pounded. The beast charged, knocking warriors aside like toys. Fire reflected in its black eyes as it set its sights on the heart of the camp, where the children were hiding. Without thinking, Daniel sprinted. He grabbed a burning spear from the ground, its shaft hot in his hands. He positioned himself between the beast and the children. "Come on," he shouted, voice breaking through the night. The beast roared, charging at him. The ground trembled with every step. Daniel steadied himself, fear clawing at his chest. At the last moment, he rolled aside, plunging the spear deep into the beast's side. The creature howled in pain, thrashing wildly. The tribe roared in awe. Warriors rushed in, striking the wounded beast with arrows and spears. Together they brought it down in a storm of fire and blood. When it finally collapsed, silence fell over the camp. Smoke rose into the night, the smell of death heavy in the air. Daniel stood over the beast's body, chest heaving, blood dripping from his arms. He looked around at the tribe. Hundreds of eyes were on him, some filled with fear, others with wonder. The leader stepped forward slowly. Her gaze was hard, but this time something new flickered in her eyes. Respect. She raised her spear high, shouting a single word. The tribe echoed it, their voices shaking the jungle. Daniel had fought as one of them. He was no longer just a captive. He was their defender. 2 years had passed since Daniel's ship crashed in the jungle. 2 years since the night he was dragged into the camp of the wild tribe of alien beauties. Now, when he woke each morning, the world no longer felt hostile. The jungle's strange songs were familiar, the glowing vines no longer frightening. The once foreign camp had become home. Daniel stood at the edge of the valley, watching the sunrise paint the sky with gold and violet. The jungle below glowed with life. mist rising between trees as creatures called to each other. His chest swelled with a strange pride. He was not just surviving anymore. He was living. Behind him, voices rose in laughter. He turned to see Kayla carrying a basket of fruit, her dark hair shining in the morning light. At her side walked another woman, taller, strong, with golden hair and sharp eyes. The leader. Once she had looked at him as a threat. Now she looked at him as something else. Together they approached him. Kayla smiled warmly, handing him the basket. The leader crossed her arms, her eyes narrowed, but there was no hatred now. Only challenge and respect. "You changed us," Kayla whispered softly, her voice still broken with human words she had learned over time. "Human, Daniel. Part of Tribe." Daniel smiled faintly, his throat tight. He remembered the night he had fought the beast, the blood, the fire. From that night onward, everything had changed. Slowly, day by day, he became part of their lives. He hunted with them. He built shelters with them. He told stories of Earth under the stars, and the children listened wide-eyed. The tribe no longer called him captive. They called him brother. And in whispers, some even called him chosen. But it was not just respect he had gained. It was love. Kayla, gentle and curious, had been the first to reach his heart. Her kindness in secret nights, her courage to believe in him when no one else did. That bond had grown into something deeper than either of them had expected. And the leader, fierce and proud, who had once sought to test him at every step, had also changed. She had seen his courage, his strength, his refusal to break even when surrounded. Where once there was only suspicion, now there was admiration. Daniel never planned this. He had not come seeking power or love, but in 2 years it found him. That evening the tribe gathered for a great feast. Fires roared high, drums echoed across the valley, and voices rose in chants that shook the trees. Hunters laid out their catches, children danced, and warriors painted new symbols of victory across their arms. In the center, Daniel sat beside Kayla and the leader. His heart was heavy with the weight of the moment. He was no longer an outsider. He was part of them. The elder stepped forward, her white hair glowing in the firelight. She raised her staff, her voice echoing over the crowd. Daniel understood only pieces of her words, but the meaning was clear. The prophecy had been fulfilled. She pointed to Daniel, then to Kayla, then to the leader. The crowd cheered, their voices like thunder. Daniel's chest tightened. His eyes met Kayla's, soft, loving. Then the leader's, fierce but steady. Both women were by his side, and both had chosen him. The tribe accepted it without question. To them it was destiny. Later, when the fires died low and the stars filled the sky, Daniel walked alone for a moment. He looked up at the twin moons, his thoughts drifting back to Earth. He had once dreamed of returning, of fixing his ship, of leaving this wild place behind. But now, he wasn't sure he wanted to. 2 years ago, he was a lost man broken in the jungle. Now he was stronger, surrounded by people who trusted him, women who loved him, children who listened to his stories as if they were sacred. He had built a life here. Kayla's soft hand touched his arm. The leader stepped beside him, her golden hair catching starlight. Together they stood at his side, watching the alien sky. Daniel breathed deeply, a quiet smile on his lips. He was no longer a captive. No longer alone. He was part of the tribe. And as the jungle whispered in the night, Daniel knew one truth with certainty. Sometimes destiny was not chosen by ships or stars, but by the bonds we make when survival turns into family.